Okay, let's dive in. When you hear Tetris, everyone has this instant picture, right?
Oh, absolutely. The grid, those falling shapes, maybe even the music starts playing in your head.
Exactly. It's woven into our culture, gamers, non-gamers, everybody seems to know Tetris.
And it's genius, really. Such a simple idea.
Yeah.
Fit these shapes, the tetrominoes, clear lines.
But that simplicity just exploded. I mean,
Yeah.
multi-billion-dollar franchise.
Right. And the Game Boy version alone, the sources say over 35 million copies sold.
35 million, that's staggering. And it basically kicked off a whole genre, didn't it? The falling block games.
Yeah, definitely. You think of, like, Dr. Mario, Puyo Puyo,
Even Sega's own game columns, they all kind of owe a debt to Tetris.
for sure. But what's really interesting and what our sources dig into for this deep dive is, well, something more specific.
Okay.
It's Sega's own history with the actual Tetris brand. And it's pretty surprising.
Surprising how, based on the material, it sounds like more than just a footnote.
Oh, way more. It's like a whole hidden chapter. We're talking early arcade games from the 80s.
Right.
Then later stuff like Tetris Sega and even this thing called Giant Tetris.
And the sources, they point to some unexpected things, right? Like
Yeah.
licensing problems.
Big time. Lots of licensing headaches that really limited where these games showed up,
Yeah.
which leads to some incredibly rare versions.
Like that Mega Drive one, the sources mentioned something crazy, like only 10 copies exist.
Exactly. And potentially worth, what, $10,000 if you found one. It's wild.
For a Tetris cartridge, wow.
And beyond just the rarity, the sources show Sega was actually experimenting. They added unique stuff.
Like,
Well, power-ups. A version that was all about puzzles, not just high scores. And, yeah.
primates.
Wait, hold on. Primates. Like monkeys. In a Tetris game.
That's what the sources say. It's this weird recurring detail we found.
Okay, now I'm hooked. So the mission today is to really unpack Sega's different takes on Tetris using these sources.
Right. What made each one different? What were the challenges? Any lasting impact? And figure out where the monkeys fit in. Let's start digging into this. Where did the sources say Sega began with Tetris?
Okay, so Sega's first official Tetris game, according to the sources, was an arcade release back in 1988.
1988. Okay.
And it was apparently a huge hit in Japan. But interestingly, the sources suggest it had this kind of quiet influence on later Tetris games, even though it wasn't widely seen elsewhere.
Right, because you didn't really see it much outside Japan, did you? Why was that?
Mainly licensing issues. The sources point to really tangled legal stuff, especially involving Atari over in the West around that time.
The classic licensing maze.
Exactly. So Sega couldn't officially release their arcade game in places like the US. And that directly ties into that super rare Mega Drive version we mentioned.
Because they couldn't sell it widely.
Precisely. That limitation is why maybe only 10 copies were ever made, hence that potential crazy price tag. The sources even mention an unofficial version called Super Tetris popping up on the Master System in Korea. Just shows how
Wow.
messy it was.
So this 88 arcade game, it was basically classic Tetris, right? Drop blocks, clear lines, endless mode.
Pretty much standard gameplay on the surface, yeah. Backgrounds changed as you played score chasing.
But the sources say it did something important, something new.
Yes, a really crucial thing, actually. It introduced lock delay.
Lock delay. That's the little moment after a piece lands, but before it actually locks, where you can still slide it.
That's the one. And the sources credit this Sega game as being the first Tetris to really implement that. It became huge for high-level play later on.
Wow. So that fundamental mechanic came from this relatively unseen Sega version.
Seems so. The sources say it was influential in series like Tetris, the Grandmaster, and even inspired similar grace period mechanics in other games, like Puyo Puyo.
That's a major contribution. And speaking of things maybe not seen widely,
The primate.
he's there. The sources mention a chimp shows up in the tutorial demo and the game over screen in the 88 arcade game.
Okay, just a chimp. Yep. And elements of this game, even the chimp, kept reappearing. The sources link it to Tetris S on the Saturn.
Okay.
Sega Tetris on Dreamcast was basically an update. Even the block colors in Tetris the Grandmaster were based on this Sega game's colors.
No way.
Yeah, and modern stuff like Puyo Tetris apparently includes a background and music remix from it. And then there's Tetris New Century.
Which was in that collection you mentioned?
Right, the Sega Ages 2501, an enhanced version of the 88 game. And yes, the sources explicitly state more chimp action.
The chimp saga continues. Okay, so that 88 game had a surprisingly big, if subtle, legacy. What came next, according to the sources?
Next up, the sources point to Blockseed. This was an arcade game from 1989.
Blockseed. Different name, but still Tetris.
Oh yeah, definitely Tetris at its core. The sources confirm that. It was actually the very first game on Sega's System C hardware, even before columns.
And I'm guessing licensing issues kept this one mostly in arcades, too.
That's what the sources strongly suggest, yeah.
Yeah.
Same kind of legal tangles probably blocked console ports back then. It did eventually show up in that Sega Ages collection, though.
So how is Block Seed different? It wasn't just plain Tetris, was it?
No, this is where Sega really started mixing it up. According to the sources, Blockseed's big thing was power-ups.
Power-ups! In Tetris, how did that work?
You'd clear special blocks, like an F block got Flicky to drop more blocks.
Flicky from the bird game.
That's the one. An S block summoned a satellite to shoot blocks. B was a bomb. 16 forework dropped a big weight, like from Fantasy Zone to Smash Blocks below.
A 16-ton weight.
Okay.
And a 4-foot block cleared 4 lines instantly. Plus, the game would add rows from the bottom sometimes to ramp up the pressure.
Huh. That sounds like it changes the whole feel of the game. Did that power-up idea stick around?
Well, Blockseed itself wasn't huge because of the limited release, but the sources definitely connect the idea of powers in Tetris to later games.
Like which ones? They mentioned games like Tetris Gaiden, Magical Tetris Challenge, Tetris Axis, even the party mode in Puyo Puyo Tetris. It seems Blockseed planted a seed, you know?
Yeah, another innovation from a lesser-known Sega version. Fascinating. So we have the 88 game with lock delay, Blockseed with power-ups. What's the third early one the sources cover?
That would be Flashpoint, also arcade, also 1989.
Another one? Different name again?
Yep, another Tetris variant published by Sega. Sometimes it credited a company called Datsu. There were some unofficial ports, but an official Mega Drive port was planned, then canceled.
Licensing again?
Almost certainly, based on the sources.
Mm.
That seems to be the constant hurdle.
And this one, Flashpoint, is also in that Sega Ages collection, both the arcade and the canceled Mega Drive version.
That's right. The sources confirm you can play both in Volume 28.
So what's Flashpoint's gimmick? How is it different?
This one's really different, according to the sources. It completely ditches the endless high score thing.
Oh, so what do you do?
It's stage-based, like 100 preset levels. And the goal isn't just clearing lines anywhere. Okay. In each stage, there's a specific glowing block, or blocks, already embedded in the layout. You have to clear that block to beat the stage.
Ah, so it's more like a puzzle game using Tetris mechanics.
Exactly. You still get random pieces, so you have to figure out how to use them to get to and clear that target block within the preset arrangement.
That sounds challenging. Does it get harder?
Oh, yeah. There are 99 main levels plus bonus stages you play till you mess up. And the sources mention the drop speed increases if you take too long on a level, adding pressure.
That puzzle focus is a really neat twist. Did that idea pop up again later?
The sources definitely draw a line from Flashpoint's puzzle style to later Tetris games. They mention Tetris 2 had a puzzle mode like this. Tetris with Card Capture Sakura involved clearing blocks to reveal cards. Tetris DS had a mission mode with specific goals on set boards.
Wow.
And even Puyo Puyo borrowed the idea for its puzzle spin-offs, Nagto Puyo. So yeah, another quiet bit of influence from an early Sega variant.
It's genuinely surprising how much these early, somewhat obscure Sega Tetris games contributed based on this material. Lock delay, power-ups, puzzle modes.
Yeah, they weren't just phoning it in. They were really trying different things. Okay, so jumping forward quite a bit in time.
Right.
Sega revisited their original 88 arcade game with Sega Tetris. This came out in arcades in 1999 and then hit the Dreamcast in 2000.
So basically a modern update of that first one, better graphics, sound.
Exactly what the sources describe.
Yeah.
It ran on the Naomi arcade hardware, so yeah, 3D graphics, much better music. But it kept the core gameplay and so the quirks.
Quirks like, dare I ask, the primate?
Oh, he's back. And according to the sources, in Sega Tetris, the, quote, residential primate now wields a hammer.
He has a hammer now, and he's residential.
Apparently. And the sources also mention he's joined by a dog with a bone to pick in the two-player mode. It's layers of weirdness.
A hammer-wielding chimp and an angry dog playing Tetris. Okay, this deep dive is certainly delivering on the unexpected. Any other big changes in this update?
The sources point out a couple of key things. One was a slot machine mechanic.
Slots. How did that work?
Clearing lines spun these slots. Depending on if you got a single, double, triple, or a Tetris clear, it would land on different symbols. Match 3, get bonus points.
Ah, so like an extra scoring incentive for specific types of clears? Clever.
Yeah, adds a layer to the score attack. The other main change was moving away from pure endless play. It had a set goal, clear over 300 lines across 17 levels.
So a defined progression.
Right. Speed ramps up, Backgrounds change. The sources say you go from like real-world places to cyberspace and eventually to the moon.
To the moon, all by dropping blocks. Nice. And the Dreamcast version added more.
Yeah, the sources mentioned the home port added modes where you could play against computer opponents, and it had more playable characters too.
Got it. Okay, you've mentioned it a few times now, that SEGA Ages 2500 Volume 28 Tetris Collection. This sounds pretty central to accessing these games today based on the sources. What exactly was it?
So the SEGA Ages 2500 series, as the sources describe it, was this line of budget titles for the PlayStation 2 in Japan. They were all about compiling or remaking classic SEGA games.
Okay.
And Volume 28, which came out in 2006, was specifically the Tetris collection. It was developed by M2.
Oh, M2. They have a fantastic reputation for quality, emulation, and retro collections.
Exactly. And that reputation seems well-deserved here. The sources confirm this collection is focused on those 3 early arcade games. The 88 Tetris, Block Seed, and Flashpoint.
Right, the ones we've been talking about.
But the real gold, according to the sources, especially for people digging deep, like us, is the bonus content. It has Tetris New Century.
The enhanced 88 game.
Yep, better audio, and crucially, the sources are very clear. More chimp antics.
Of course, more chimp antics. It's unavoidable.
It's definitely a recurring theme in the material. The collection also has that previously unreleased Mega Drive prototype of Flashpoint.
Oh, cool.
And maybe the biggest deal for collectors. An emulated version of that incredibly rare Mega Drive version of the original 88 Tetris.
The potential $10,000 one, you can just play it in this collection.
That's what the sources indicate, yeah. Plus, you get different arcade board versions of the main games, too. So, as presented in the sources, it really is the definitive way to experience these specific SEGA Tetris games.
That sounds absolutely essential for anyone interested in this specific history. Okay, one more title the sources highlighted. Tetris Giant.
Yes. Tetris Giant, arcade game from 2009. And the sources paint this one as, well, physically unique.
Giant? How giant?
True to the name. It had these huge arcade sticks, designed for 2 hands each.
Whoa! Giant controllers for giant blocks.
Basically, yeah. It plays by standard Tetris rules, mostly, but the big twist, the sources emphasize, is the scale. The tetrominoes are massive compared to the playfield.
How big is the field?
Tiny. The sources say it's just 6 squares wide by 8 squares high. Compare that to the usual 10 by 20 or 21.
6 by 8. You have almost no room to maneuver. It must be incredibly frantic.
Yeah, the sources imply it forces a very different, much faster-paced strategy. It had single-player score and line challenges, plus a 2-player mode.
Any other quirks?
Well, adding to the unique vibe, the sources mentioned it featured background music with lyrics playing while you played.
Lyrical Tetris on a giant machine with giant controllers and a tiny grid. That is quite something.
A definite outlier, even in this unusual history.
So if we look back at the sources, that really covers the main SEGA Tetris games, the 88 arcade original and its influence, the innovations in Block Seed and Flashpoint, the SEGA Tetris update, that vital Tetris collection, and the sheer bigness of Tetris Giant. It's way more complex than I would have guessed.
It really is. The sources show SEGA wasn't just slapping a logo on things. They were genuinely experimenting with the form, sometimes in ways that had these quiet ripples later on.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey sorting through these sources on SEGA and Tetris, from those foundational 80s games.
Right, establishing things like lock delay.
To the variations like Block Seed bringing in power-ups, Flashpoint focusing on puzzles.
Ideas that definitely reappeared elsewhere.
Then the modern update with SEGA Tetris, that amazing-sounding Tetris collection preserving so much.
Essential for this history, yeah.
And just the pure oddity of Tetris Giant.
Can't forget the giant sticks.
So the key takeaway from the sources seems to be that these SEGA versions, they weren't just clones. They really did introduce important stuff.
Absolutely. That lock delay became standard. The ideas behind power-ups and puzzle modes, while maybe not originating solely here in every case, were definitely explored early by SEGA and popped up again and again in the genre.
And look, we just have to mention it one last time. That bizarre, recurring detail the sources kept bringing up, the chimp.
He's unavoidable in this story.
From the 88 original Tetris S, Tetris New Century, the sources even say he cameoed in 3D Thunderblade. That's
what the material suggests. Sega's weird, unofficial Tetris mascot for a while there, a hammer-wielding one eventually.
Just incredible. Okay, so maybe a final thought here for you, the listener, based on this deep dive. When you really dig into the sources, even for a game you think is super simple, like Tetris, you find this hidden history, full of weird twists like licensing nightmares leading to ultra-rare
Like
games.
that Mega Drive version.
Real technical innovations that actually shaped how we play these games today.
Lock delay, power-up
And
concepts.
just genuinely bizarre details like, the ongoing saga of the Tetris primate.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other games that we think we know inside out have these hidden layers, these forgotten contributions, these strange little stories, just waiting there if you piece them together block by block?